Good morning, everybody. My role today is to welcome you to Texas State Technical College, but the price you'll pay for the free lunch is, it is free, isn't it? Okay, the price you'll pay is a 30-second commercial on TSTC. I hope you'll hang in there with me. So Texas is blessed with an amazing constellation of superstars in the higher ed sector. I mean, think about the diversity of options that we have here in Texas. And among the two-year sector, there are more than 50 public institutions across the state. And among those bright stars, TSTC is unique. And there's a million reasons why, and I'll hit on some of them. The first is TSTC's mission is very, very narrow. All we're supposed to do is a skilled workforce. We aren't to focus on the broad, comprehensive mission of, say, a community college, which is blessed with a really broad range of capabilities. In that specialization, we've gotten really, really good at it. And here's some of the reasons why. We're the only two-year school in Texas that has a statewide mission. And workforce is our only purpose. For that reason, it's not a big surprise that among the public institutions, we're the top producer of things like diesel mechanics, the top producer of power linemen. Indeed, we train 80% of all the new power linemen in Texas. So the next time we have a freeze, go outside and thank that TSTC grad that's putting your power back up. We are the top producer of welders in Texas. Indeed, the largest teaching welding lab in North America is about 400 yards that way, over on Crest. We do 60 other programs in which we tend to be best in class. And our headquarters is here in Waco, Texas, and has been since 1965 when we were chartered by the legislature. And we are so delighted today to host this Texas Tribune event, particularly given the fact that we're going to talk about higher ed and workforce. And an essential part of the mission of higher ed is indeed a skilled workforce. And there are bunches of colleges that do it well, and you're going to hear from some of them today. And so, welcome. We're honored to have you here. If you're ever out and about Texas, go visit one of our other 9 other campuses. And we hope to extend hospitality to you there as we do here. Thank you very much for being here today. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And my name is Matthew Watkins. I'll be the moderator for today's panel. I'm managing editor of News and Politics for the Texas Tribune. Thank you to everyone who is in the room, who has joined us, and also for those in the room, see the cameras in the back. We also have people joining us online, streaming from texastribune.org. I'm going to read off a few kind of bits of information before we get started. First of all, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, the Greater Texas Foundation, and our major sponsors, Educate Texas, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, Raise Your Hand Texas, Trellis Foundation, Texas 2036, Philanthropy and Philanthropy Advocates Foundation supported. There's also foundation support by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And also our standard disclaimer on our articles and events: the corporate sponsors and donors underwrite this event. They play no role in determining the content, speakers, or line of questioning. I want to again thank Texas State Technical College, where we are here in Waco, for hosting this event. And special thanks to Nick Alvarado, Maria Aguirre Acuna, Valerie Smith, and Sarah Ragsdale for their help in getting this event organized. And I also want to remind y'all that the Texas Tribune is a nonprofit news organization, which means we're supported by folks who value our journalism and public events like this. We're wrapping up the 2022 year, and we would love you to donate to sustain our newsroom into the new year. You can head to texastribune.org/donate to contribute to the work that we do. A few housekeeping notes. We're going to talk for a little bit, about 45 minutes of Q&A with the members of this panel up on the stage. Then we'll have some time for audience questions at the end. There are microphones in the back corners of this room for anyone who has a question. I'll try to give a heads up, and you can just go ahead and walk over to a mic and line up, and we will call on you to ask your questions. All right, are y'all ready? Let's go ahead and get started then. We'll go down the line and introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Johnette Edwards McKown, who became the third president of McLennan Community College in 2009. Her accomplishments include providing leadership and student scholarships, the campus food pantry, a new first generation program, the pantry is, and initiating the Stephen and Stuart McKown Emergency Fund. Welcome. We also have Melissa Henderson, the Chief of Staff for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Executive Director for the Texas Higher Education Foundation. In this dual role, she works closely with the Higher Education Commissioner to ensure close collaboration across the executive team and leads the foundation's work to identify resources and build partnerships. We also have Barb Clapp, who is the CEO of Dwyer Workforce Development, a nonprofit whose purpose is to provide certified nursing assistant and geriatric nursing assistant training and entry-level job positions to individuals who lack opportunity and who aspire to a career in the healthcare industry. Their work is beginning in Texas now, just recently, and we're going to go into some more detail about what that is here in a few minutes, and look forward to hearing about that. And then we also have Rick Herrera, the Vice Chancellor and Chief Student Services Officer for the Texas State Technical College System. His responsibilities include overseeing enrollment management, student services, facilities planning and construction, information technology, auxiliary services, and the TSTC Waco Airport, which I believe we are looking at right outside this window. He has been with the college for 13 years. So thank you to all for joining us. All right, Melissa, I want to start with a question with you, and it's a question that kind of, I think, hopefully will set the tone for our conversation here about kind of the challenges that we face as a state in terms of higher education and workforce development. And I want to start off by listing off a few different statistics about this is about the school children in Texas right now. We're talking about K through 12 students. These are the students who will soon be coming, hopefully, college students or members of the Texas workforce. We're about 60% of those students, or about 2/3 of those students are Black or Hispanic. 60% are economically disadvantaged. 20% have limited English proficiency. And they're entering a workforce where in the next 5 to 10 years, there is an expectation that we'll be short about 4,000 jobs in manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, 4,500 jobs in HVAC technicians. We'll be short about 7,000 plumbers, 10,000 electricians, 13,000 computer network systems. That's not even accounting for the more advanced degree jobs that you see around engineering. I know a big shortage there. Nursing, the medical field, family practitioners, all different kinds of jobs where if you talk to the leaders of the state or the business community of this state, there is a concern about how we will build the workforce the next year. So, what you were really talking about here is a population of students who individually are going to be in a lot of need of training and, are going to take a lot of resources to educate. And then on the other side, a lot of businesses who want to grow here, want to, establish their presence here, but are also worried about the, employees to fill those jobs. How prepared are we as a state for that situation coming forward?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all today. And I think it's a really important question to start our conversation with today, and it's exactly why when Commissioner Keller came in 2019, he was already thinking about how to re-envision and revise the statewide strategic plan for higher education, known then as 60 by 30 Texas. And even at that time, pre-pandemic, he was already thinking about how do we more inclusively incorporate adult learners into our statewide strategic plan, which the 60 by 30 plan had been silent on. He was already thinking about how do we make sure that the credentials that are being awarded are credentials with purpose and value in the labor market, and how do we think about research and development and reincorporating that into our plan, which the 60 by 30 plan had been silent on, but is enormously important in a knowledge-driven economy. And so in 2020, we launched an effort in partnership with the Texas Higher Education Foundation, which is the official nonprofit partner to the coordinating board and the coordinating board, to re-envision and revise that plan, which is now known as Building a Talent Strong Texas. And as you can hear in that title, the focus is on how are we building a talent-strong Texas? How are we meeting the needs of workforce and the needs of our economy and serving students with opportunities to participate and benefit from that economy? And so we really wanted to ground that work in deep stakeholder engagement and hear from communities across the state, hear from higher ed, hear from K-12, hear from business and industry. When they thought about these focus areas, what did they see as the challenges and opportunities in their communities, in their regions? And that work really deeply informed the goals that you now see in the Building a Talent Strong Texas plan. And I'll just touch briefly on those, and I'm sure we can come back to some of them later. But really the ways that we're thinking about this from the state perspective are, with our attainment goals, not just focusing on our young adult population, which we know is critically important, and so you still see that in the plan with a 60% attainment goal for our 25 to 34-year-old Texans, but adding that goal for 35 to 64-year-old Texans as well. So that's one way that we've revised the attainment goal. The second way that I would touch on is the inclusion of the language or other post-secondary credential of value. And so in addition to looking at the degrees and certificates that we have always counted and will continue to count, we want to make sure that we're also capturing and counting other credentials that have value and purpose in the labor market that we haven't historically included in our goals. So whether that's industry-based certifications, whether that's continuing in executive education, whether that's stackable micro-credentials, we want to make sure that we have a holistic and inclusive view of all of the various types of credentials that are being awarded and that have that value in the labor market that's demonstrated from employers and through earnings data. The second area is around credentials of value, and this is really the heart of the plan. And this is attempting to ask and answer the question, are you better off as an individual Texan, having earned the credential that you have earned, are you better off than you would have otherwise been relative to a high school graduate? And this really, again, is the heart of the plan. And Texas is the first state in the nation to condition our completion goals on this notion of value and purpose in the labor market, and we're really excited about that. And also looking at debt. Debt is an enormous part of this conversation as well. And so we've evolved our debt goal to focus on, are you graduating with either no debt or manageable debt in the context of the potential earnings associated with your credential? So making sure that we're keeping an eye on and monitoring that manageable debt. And then third, as I touched on, the research and development piece, which the 60 by 30 plan had been silent on, but wanting to make sure that we're keeping a focus on that. So focused on increasing our sponsored and federal research expenditures and increasing our research doctoral graduates. But again, what I would go back to, and again, across all of this, making sure that we're renewing our commitment to equity. Because to your point, the students that are in Texas public school classrooms or any K-12 classrooms today are the future of Texas. And if we're not preparing those students for what comes next, then we're not going to be successful as an economy. And Texas has grown more than any state in the nation in the last decade. 95% of that growth has been in communities of color. So if we're not advancing our goals equitably, we simply can't meet our goals, and we want to make sure that we're doing so in deep partnership with business and industry to make sure that those credentials have value and purpose in the labor market.
Right. And the people on this stage are in many ways deeply involved in the work and trying to address those goals. And I want to talk a little bit about individually with this group about their various entities and how they are doing that. Since we are on a TSTC campus, I feel I should go to you first, Rick. This is quite a facility here. We're sitting under an airplane. There are airplanes taking off and landing nearby, and all different kinds of facilities here where people are learning what seems to be very practical experiences. Tell us a little bit about how the TSTC approach differs from your traditional higher ed approach to educating students.
Well, as our chancellor mentioned on the introduction, we are a college that focuses on the skills needed to get a job. We have a very finite focus in comparison to the comprehensive community college. For us, it's about making sure that the student that gets on that airplane is going to find a rewarding career when he gets his license. And we base all of our decisions around that goal. If the program we're offering will not lead to a great paying job, we'll stop offering the program. If it's not rewarding, then why offer it? So the 60 by 30 plan, when that rolled out, I think we got a little bit of a head start, and that's in our mission. That's what we're expected to do as TSTC.
Very good. Okay, Barb, I want to talk about your program as well, which is, as we mentioned at the start, just getting started in Texas. And tell us a little bit about how you're specifically working in the nursing field, the medical field. And it sounds to be a fascinating and very comprehensive service, very targeted towards the students, the people who will eventually hold those jobs. Can you just give us an overview of what it is you're providing and what the goal is that you're working towards with this?
Absolutely, and good afternoon, everybody. Dwyer Workforce Development is a not-for-profit with a mission of helping people who lack opportunity, solving the healthcare staffing crisis, and improving the lives of seniors. We have the workforce development piece of it, but we also just purchased 64 skilled nursing facilities throughout Texas, and we're changing them into not-for-profit facilities and using them to fund the workforce not-for-profit, as well as we'll create not-for-profit nursing facilities that will allow staffing in the healthcare field. So we're doing both of those things. The most important thing we're doing, and to the first question, is we're addressing people who lack opportunity. So we're working with young people, for instance, who are aging out of foster care and would like a career in healthcare but don't have the resources. Or young people identified in Title I schools in Baltimore City who would like a healthcare career, and they've had an enrichment program their whole lives, but they get to senior year and they get offered good colleges, but they can't get in the college because they can't afford it. Or single mothers, single paycheck mothers with 3 children that need a career. So we are working very hard to train them as CNAs, and then we give them after a year an opportunity to to upskill, be med techs, P techs. They can go all the way up through LPN and RN and PA, and we will pay for that. But the differences in what we do is you can train somebody over and over again, but if you don't take the barriers to employment away from their life, you're throwing your money away. You know, these people have lacked opportunity, and one little no can knock them off their path. So we're doing intensive case management. I have LCSWCs who work one-on-one with my Dwyer scholars, we call them. And we make sure that the smallest thing doesn't knock them off their path. And we take a holistic approach. We offer affordable childcare, transportation, adult learning service, anything that they need, we offer to them. We help them if they've been evicted. We're going to be building housing, multi-income housing for them, and we're really focusing on the childcare crisis. So that's kind of what we're doing that we think, we've been told is revolutionary. We started it in Maryland. We're down here, and we're excited to be here. I've never met such nice people.
What made you choose to come to Texas?
Sorry?
What made you choose to come to Texas?
Well, the facilities are here, and those facilities will be funded as not-for-profit facilities, which are better for our employees. I have 8,000 employees in Texas now. So that will be better for the employees, for the residents, but it also is better for our staff. And we will staff our facilities, but we're also planning on staffing all healthcare facilities throughout Texas.
Dr. Edwards McKown, I was looking at a poll yesterday that said that among Texans, the approval rating for community colleges is 95%, which is nothing in Texas is that popular. Community colleges are more popular than dogs, I think, in Texas. What is it that, by contrast, we saw, I think it's safe to assume that there's going to be a lot of political heat around the, traditional four-year schools in the legislative session this year. We saw a press conference from the Lieutenant Governor yesterday where he kind of reiterated one of his top priorities was to target tenure among university professors. I think it's safe to say that that's going to be a very intense political fight in the next session. Community colleges, on the other hand, as I said, extremely popular. What is it that makes this model something that everyone seems to be able to get around? And how can schools such as your own take advantage of that to help be a part of the solution moving forward to these challenges?
Well, we serve a local and regional initiative. And so we try to start, even with the GED and the high school diploma, we're trying to create a pathway to success for our communities and for the state of Texas, who benefits when we have people who trained and can do things. So here, we also listen to our partners. We meet regularly with the heads of the hospitals, and we talk about what can we do different to get more to educate more nurses and more of the other health professions that we do, because it's a critical need. And so we are trying to continue to find ways to increase those numbers. And with the educators in particular, we meet individually with all of our dual credit partners, which there are about 28 schools. And we talk about how can we help you? And the critical need we're seeing is in teachers. And so we're developing new programs with our partners, with Tarleton State and Texas Tech, where they can get a whole degree here, a bachelor or a master's degree. And at the same time, we partner with TSTC. We're different here than it is around the state. They have other locations, but here we particularly, we don't do the things they do and they don't do the things that we do. But because we are part of our community, we're real committed to equity and helping our students find a path to success in all of the fields that we teach. And we have some technical programs, and probably it's even heading toward 40% now. It's been about 25 to 30% because we are one of those that has a high transfer rate, possibly because TSTC does some of the things we don't. And so we are a great partner with them and with different people in the community, but we are here based totally on the students and also changing the economy. And because there's so many of us, we cover the whole state of Texas in one way or another. And in a large way, there are around 640,000 of us that are enrolled, and probably, 25% of those may be technical. We're a little bit larger than TSTC. What they do is they do great work in the slice that they cover, and they have, around 16,000, 17,000 statewide. So there's a big difference in the numbers, but what they do is really remarkable. So it's going to take all of us to really make the differences that are expected by the state.
Absolutely. So we are, of course, on the verge of a legislative session. I already mentioned that. And it is a legislative session in which there is an unusual amount of money available to be spent. We're talking about a $27 billion surplus. Somebody told me just recently that not too long ago, that was the entire budget of the state of Louisiana, and that's just the surplus we're talking about. One big thing that has kind of come up during that conversation is the rethinking how community colleges are funded. And I want to go to Melissa first on this, because this is something that is involving the Higher Education Coordinating Board, and see whether maybe you could help explain to us what is being discussed, what has been recommended to the legislature, and also how that has been received.
Sure, happy to, and would welcome Dr. McKown to chime in. So, as you know, the coordinating board was charged last session with supporting the Commission on Community College Finance, which we've been working to do over the last several months, chaired by Woody Hunt from El Paso, and those recommendations were released earlier this month. And I think there are some really key potential game changers in those recommendations. I think the first is around shifting from a funding model that is primarily focused on inputs to one that is primarily focused on outcomes, with a particular emphasis on completion of credentials and on transfer. I think the second game changer, or another game changer, I should say, is, as Dr. McKown knows better than anybody, the funding model, property taxes are an incredibly important part of the existing funding model, and the tax base of institutions, of community colleges across the state varies dramatically, and the yield from those tax bases varies dramatically. And so there are recommendations in from the commission that focus on a guaranteed yield for community colleges, so that in particular our small, our rural serving, our medium-sized colleges, those capacity constraints that exist because of that differentiation in the tax base, providing a guaranteed yield would be an enormous game changer, particularly for those smaller institutions. And then I think the focus on financial aid. Affordability is something that we of course talk a lot about in higher ed. And right now we're only able to fund about 27% of the eligible students in our 2-year institutions through the Texas Education Opportunity Grant. One of the recommendations, in addition to financial aid for dual credit and for work-based learning opportunities, is to fund the same percentage of eligible students as we're currently funding with Texas grants. So going from about 27% to about 55%, that's a $127 million investment alone. Just that piece alone would be a $127 million investment over the biennium for students in our community colleges. And I think, there are a number of other things within the recommendations that I think are incredibly important, and I think those are just 3 that I would highlight. I think the commissioner and the commission members and our partners, of course, working very closely with the community colleges, I think to your second part of your question, have been very encouraged with the conversations that they've had thus far with the legislature and with legislative leadership, and we at the coordinating board are incredibly excited to continue to support that work and to continue to inform those deliberations throughout session. And Dr. McKown, I don't know if you have things you would add to that.
How much would this change, if at all, how much would this change things for schools such as yours?
This would be transformational for us. If the part on the dual credit where the state would pay for those on free and reduced lunch, we're already paying for that. So that would really help us financially. And across the state, we have some of our community colleges that are paying the full amount. Some of the smallest, the most rural, can't afford to. Some of those with the larger tax bases, like in Dallas and Tarrant, they have that in their business model. And our business models are very different across the state. But we believe it would be transformational, and we know there are 2 parts of this. It's an easier sell to say we're going to go totally outcomes-based. I think that's something that everybody can relate to on completion and the different kinds of ways we're going to respond. But when we then ask for the funding, you're not talking about a one-time funding and you're done. This could be something that, could be for years. And already talking to legislators, which we are doing, we know, and if you read the paper today from the Lieutenant Governor, that it's important that everybody realizes the importance of how transformational this is going to be for our communities, and particularly for our communities of color and our lower income, to ensure that they can get an education and they can have a credential and contribute meaningful way to society.
I want to talk a little bit about the concept of the outcomes-based funding a little bit. Can you expand a little bit on what the theory behind that is, and how such a thing might work?
Which one of us would you like to talk?
Melissa, how about you?
Sure, I'm happy to start, and then Dr. McKown would welcome you to chime in. So it's looking at a number of different metrics, as I mentioned, of course, with a focus primarily on completion of credentials and on transfer. So really shifting from a focus on seat time and contact hours, and what the students that we're bringing into programs, shifting to a focus that is on outcomes, right, as is implied in the title. And so really aligning the incentives to what we are hoping to see and what we know our colleges are focused on, which is the success of students and the completion of those credentials, so that they're then able to go out into the workforce and increase their earnings, or to then transfer on to a university and complete a bachelor's program, or go on to a master's, graduate education, et cetera.
And my understanding, Rick, is that TSTC is currently funded on an outcomes-based model, and uniquely among higher education in the state in that way. How does that work for y'all? Is it an effective model?
Most definitely. Anything that you set a measure to will trigger a behavior. And if you pick the right measure, it'll revolutionize the way you approach education as a whole. For us, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about the student earning. If the program isn't going to give them a reasonable wage that they can start a life with, then we're not going to bother to offer it. So for us, when we transition to the outcomes-based fundings of earnings, we started closing programs, we started revamping our curriculum, we started redoing the way we schedule and the number of hours we offer to what is the bare minimum needed to be successful for that particular job. And we do so in consulting with our industry advisory groups to make sure that the students that leave our college are well prepared to be successful in the field that they chose. The revolution comes back from everybody in the college knows that we're all about placing more Texans in great paying jobs. So all the decisions we make are centered around it. How will what I do today influence or affect or impact and make that better for us? So for me, for the rest of the community colleges, being an outcomes-based, it's great. You pick the right outcome, it will change behavior to make that successful.
You know, I think one thing that I learned, I'm a former higher education reporter, and back before I moved on into editing, and a lot of the stories that I did when I would talk to students, when I would talk to administrators, would be about, you know, funding models are great, facilities are great, professors are great, but there's so much kind of going on in the lives of so many students that also presents challenges. Particularly when you're talking about the, you know, what folks call non-traditional students, which is the, you know, people who aren't 18 to 22-year-olds living on campus at a four-year university. You know, it's almost kind of a misnomer to call that non-traditional, because I think there's more students like that now than there are the, you know, quote-unquote traditional students. But, I mean, Barb, it seems like that is a lot of what your organization is built around, trying to give those folks the services, the support they need in order to get through that education, where it's not just you're rising and falling based on how hard you work or how smart you are, but based on what's going on in your life. And if you're a single parent, or if you're working a job, you know, or maybe you need to cut back on your hours or step away for a semester in order to provide money for your family and everything like that. What we see in people's experience and research is that it can be very hard to recover from that. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about, I know you're still just now approaching or getting ready to get started working with students in Texas, but I think this is a problem that is everywhere. What the experiences are for students that are very committed to bettering their lives through education, but have those obstacles standing in front of them in some ways.
So everything we do is outcomes-based. We get grants from the state, and we are data-driven. So we have to prove that the money that we're getting is showing a return. And one of the things that we've seen as a differentiator is the case management. And, you know, when you are struggling with opportunity and you have these barriers, my case manager can jump in and take care of things that might seem small to all of us in this room, but are not small to my Dwyer scholars. And It could be things like helping people get through clinicals and giving them child care grants. Or if somebody has a domestic violence event in their lives, we went in, somebody lived in Baltimore City and with their mother and their child, and somebody came that they were seeing came and knocked down their door, and they didn't want to go to clinicals because they were frightened to leave their daughter and their mother there alone without a door, and we went and fixed the door. But there's all kinds of things that can knock people off their path. And what we've learned now that with this, in the first year, we've trained 287 CNAs, and our stick rate is 95%. So it's showing us that removing those barriers, you can expect outcomes, but it doesn't make sense if the barriers aren't removed.
You know, this obviously requires a very strong financial investment, right? And you know, one thing I am curious about is scalability, right? I mean, you know, in a community college, for instance, there are a lot of students, as you mentioned, enrolled in community college. Maybe I'm wrong, but my guess is that there's probably not enough money around to provide that level of support for every kind of student. What can colleges like yours do to try to address those needs in a scalable way to keep people from kind of slipping through the cracks in that manner?
You know, things have changed a lot as far as what we provide, and we have basic needs, the emergency fund you mentioned that I started, because students get to a certain place and sometimes they can't finish. And I remember one nurse in particular who had to work less hours to her last term, and we were able to give her a small grant. Or they may have had their books stolen or the house burned or all of those kind of things. They have those. So we have to help with that. We help with transportation. You think about 20 years ago, none of these things were there, but we help with that. We can help with some child care. We have a food pantry. We reach out to help them because so many of them too are working full time. And so how they work full time and have a full load, it's amazing. And sometimes they don't make it and they have to start over. Counseling services are critical these days, particularly since the pandemic. For everyone, that's an issue. And so I'm always sending students to do that. But what we're talking about too with adults, we need to make better inroads with adults. I guess just the last few days signed something with Amazon. We're going to be a provider of choice along with our partners, Tech and Tarleton, and we're going to have to help those adults see a way because we haven't done a very good job in the past of knowing how to reach adults. But working through employers like that, we're working with the City of Waco to really show them passive opportunity. It's really important.
I also know the Higher Education Coordinating Board has put in its among its budget requests a possibility of more funding for college advising as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what y'all are asking for or possibly envisioned in that request?
Sure, and if I could just build on Dr. McKown's point briefly. So to the point of emergency aid and meeting some of these basic needs, I just also wanted to add, that's absolutely something that we see as well. On the foundation side, the Texas Higher Education Foundation, which is the nonprofit partner to the agency, early on in the pandemic, we were able to partner with a number of funders, including the Trellis Foundation and the Greater Texas Foundation, to create a pooled emergency fund from which we were able to make grants to 86 institutions for exactly this. And what we saw was that the need for those flexible dollars to support things like food insecurity, access to internet, and all of the basic needs that just allow students to stay enrolled were so critical. And from that, we saw, north of 90% of those students able to stay enrolled. And so I just wanted to echo the point that meeting basic needs of students is incredibly important, particularly as we think about working age adults and the things that they're juggling as they are also trying to attain their education. And I think, to that point, to your advising question, there's a number of things that we're working on in the advising space with our tri-agency partners. I think one of the ones that we are most excited about is a a tool that we're developing called My Texas Future. And so as part of what that exceptional item request would support would be the continued development of My Texas Future, which is essentially a centralized one-stop advising shop for all varieties of students with a differentiated experience depending on what type of student you are. So if you are a returning adult, for example, which is the population that we're going to be rolling it out to first, you have one place to go where you can access career information, understand what the jobs are that are in demand, look across institutions for programmatic information. And if you're one of the 4 million Texans with some college and no credential, there will also be a tool called Map My Path where you can look and see, these are the courses that I've taken, here's how they apply across different programs, across different institutions, here's my fastest path to that credential of value and to that increased earnings experience that I'm looking for as a returning adult. There's also virtual advising through our advising chatbot that will be available. So we're really trying to make it much easier and much more straightforward, particularly for those students like working age adults and returning adults that we know just don't have time and don't have the resources available to them to understand how to navigate the complex ecosystem that can be higher education and look across institutions. So we're working to consolidate those resources and make it much more simple and straightforward for them to receive the advising that they need, whether you are an adult, whether you're a student coming straight out of high school, or whether you are a transfer student, but differentiating that by the needs of those different populations.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we've also seen in trying to reach students, particularly those non-traditional students or students who have started school and not finished. We've written about programs of trying to find people who may have various credits and helping them find some kind of certificate or anything. And there seems to be a lot of support for that kind of work from the state. There's a willingness to put money behind those things, but also often it can also seem challenging to find those students, right? And make them aware of the resources that are available to you. I mean, this campus here, Rick, is an example of a unique service that many people may not know is available to them. Can you tell me a little bit about how y'all are finding people and bringing them into this school to get the services y'all offer?
What we learned by studying our website traffic is they're trying to find you. Our population is 60% traditional, 40% non-traditional, but our website traffic is the inverse of that. The non-trads are looking for an option, and if they don't find it, they're going to keep browsing. So with the whole competency-based initiative, which we branded performance-based, it's about how successful the student will be. And the model for these programs is you get your coursework online, so you can do that at your convenience when it's convenient for you. And then you can schedule your lab hours anywhere from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. The problem with a non-trad is they got to support a family. They got a job to do. They got to work 40 hours a week. So we got to make ourselves accessible to them. When do you want to be able to come in and take your lab hours? And that's what competency-based education format for us, that's what we believe was lacking when they were browsing our website. So we're trying to convert as many and all programs to that format as quick as we can.
Barb, I have sort of the same question for you. How are you finding the students that you'll be providing these whole wraparound services for?
We are finding ours by partnering with other not-for-profits. So, we're working with, like I mentioned earlier, not-for-profits that help people that are aging out of foster care, not-for-profits that are working with abused women, not-for-profits that help people that are battling or have conquered addiction. So we are getting a lot of our scholars through that pipeline, and it's insane how many people want to be part of the program. And once they hear about us, we get hits all the time on our website for people that are interested. And now a lot of not-for-profits are contacting us to work with their people. The other place we get them is through workforce boards, through the state workforce boards. And I neglected to say earlier, we don't train them ourselves. We actually work with the community colleges and some other not-for-profits to train our scholars. So we're in early discussions already with Austin Community College and different colleges in the area, community colleges in the area. We already had a conversation. Then we're also working with like Goodwill Industries, who does workforce training. So we're trying to spread mission impact. It's really important to us. In Baltimore City, we're working with Baltimore City Community College, Community College of Baltimore County, and it's really worked well because it's a little different here, but a lot of the community colleges don't have access to case management and a holistic approach. And so as a team, we're really driving outcomes for the community colleges and for the not-for-profit.
Okay, so we are at a point now where if there are any questions from the audience, we would love to hear them. Like I mentioned before, we have the microphones here, one over here, and one in the back of the room in the back corner. Just feel free to walk up and ask a question if you have it. And in the meantime, I will ask another question of you, Melissa, which is that I mentioned before this large surplus, and we're heading into a legislative session. You know, there is a good amount of money available to be spent this session. There is probably an even larger amount of things that people would like to see that money go to. And of course, there will be some competition. You know, we have heard from the leaders of the legislature of state government that a very large chunk of that money will likely be going to property tax reduction. We've heard calls for things, you know, going towards law enforcement and various other areas. What do you think the energy is in the legislature to devote some of that to the things that we've discussed or other areas in higher education and workforce development? And you know, how are folks making the case to the legislature that this might be an area where money might be well spent?
Sure. So I would start by saying, you know, the three key issues that we at the coordinating board are focused on informing deliberations around are number one, financial aid. Our exceptional item request for $153 million for maintaining the current percentage of eligible students in Texas grants, TEOG and TEG. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if we wanted to increase the percentage of eligible students that we're serving in TEOG to equal the percentage that we're serving in Texas grants, which is one of the recommendations of the Commission on Community College Finance, that would be an additional $127 million above the $153 million that we've requested. The two other programs that I would mention in that, in addition to our existing need-based financial aid, which, you know, I would also say, you know, financial aid is one of the biggest policy levers that we have as we think about meeting our goals around attainment, meeting our goals around completion, supporting students in maintaining manageable debt. Financial aid is a key policy lever there. The two other programs that I would mention that are a part of our exceptional item request are the Texas transfer grants. So oftentimes, the students that are able to be served through Texas grants are either students coming straight out of high school or returning students. We typically don't have funding to support transfer students, so seated with GEAR funds that we received from the governor's office and legislative leadership, we were able to work with institutions to create the Texas Transfer Grants program. So really for the first time, we have dedicated portable scholarships available for transfer students. And as we know, most of our students in Texas attend more than one institution. And so having those financial resources for our students as they move among institutions is really important. The other piece of our request there is for a program called the Texas Leadership Scholars. We saw in the data early on in the pandemic that about 17% of our students who are graduating in the top 10% of their high school class, so these are the students who've done everything we've asked them to do, are not enrolling anywhere in the nation. And 3/4 of that 17% are students of color. And so we really wanted to focus resources on providing opportunities to encourage those students to to encourage those students who are high-achieving students, often from low-income backgrounds, to provide a 4-year scholarship for them covering tuition and fees to attend Texas institutions. And in addition to that coverage of 4 years, they also have opportunities for internship, for mentorship, for undergraduate research, so really trying to support those students in their academic journey. So that's all part of our exceptional item request around financial aid. We're also, of course, focused very much so on supporting the work of the Commission on Community College Finance. That, of course, will require, to Dr. McKown's point, moving to a dynamic funding model rather than a static allocation model is a significant investment of resources. And I think, again, as I said earlier, the commissioner and the commission members, I think, have been encouraged by the conversations that they've been having with the legislature thus far. And so we'll continue to focus on that. And then the third area is around research and development and making sure that we have the right resources available to support innovation ecosystems across the state.
Do you feel like when you talk to your local lawmakers or anyone else that they hear the message of the value of supporting the work that you do?
Yes, particularly because we have relationships with our legislators across the state. And we develop really good meetings with them, and so they really want to help us if they can. They see in their local communities, particularly in some of the smaller and rural ones, the important role that community colleges have. And so they see the need, and so we always have really good conversations with them. Getting down to appropriating the money, then we'll, once we get past the new model, we're really hoping for that.
I actually, as we talked a little bit about enrollment, one other thing I wanted to ask was we did see enrollment dip sharply in fall of 2020. You could likely look to things like the pandemic as a possible reason for that. They've climbed up a little bit since then, but we're still in community colleges down 85,000 students in Texas since the fall of 2019. A surprising number given some of the other things that we've discussed so far today. What do you attribute that to?
Well, there are really several things. The part of the pandemic is that students lost some years in high school. And so they're not prepared to do some of them can't do the TSI. It's the mental part of that as well. And here in Waco, and I'm sure other places, the economy is doing such a good job that some people are choosing to go to work rather than to increasing their education. So that's why we think our partnerships are important. But with an economy, with someone like Amazon starting with $18 to $20 an hour just right out of high school, we're seeing those kind of, which are good for our community, but still we think that part, typically when the economy is good, then people aren't coming to school.
Could I build on that? So I absolutely agree with everything Dr. McKown says, and I think that's what we see in the data. I think we largely see that these students are working. I think, unfortunately, it's often in roles that don't provide a lot of opportunity for upward mobility. And so I think to Dr. McKown's point, we would much rather see them working and enrolled. Chairman Daniel with TWC has reported that of the unemployment claims that they've processed in the last 2 years, 70% of those have been for individuals without credentials beyond high school. 3% have been for individuals with bachelor's degrees or above. And so I think, as we think about that, thinking about how we can support students as they need to be in the workforce, but making sure that we're, as Dr. McKown said, focused on how do we make sure that they're able to work and be enrolled.
Okay, looks like we have an audience question.
Hi, Sue McMillan, Greater Texas Foundation. This question is for Rick. In addition to some of the unique programs that you offer with performance-based education and your outcomes-based funding, you offer a program that you don't hear about very frequently in higher ed, which is a money-back guarantee. Can you talk a little bit about your money-back guarantee, the programs that it's applicable to, and how you decide which programs you apply that to?
We started the program several years ago when we launched the Fort Bend campus, and it's exactly what it sounds like. If 6 months after graduating from the college you don't get a job, we will refund you your tuition. The whole idea behind that is to show faith, confidence in what we offer, and guarantee an employment. Regarding the programs, we have welding programs, line worker programs. We have a total of about 8 to 10 programs in that offering, but there's also something required of the student to be part of that program. They commit to participating in their interview practicums. They participate in additional soft skills to get them better prepared. And as of yet that I know of, and someone from the audience can correct me, I don't think we refunded any money to anybody.
All right. I think we have one more person walking up to the mic for a question.
That's me, not very fast, sorry. This is for the Dwyer Workforce. There are efforts across the state of Texas, and there's some going on in Waco too, for this upskilling of the workforce that needs to be employed. So it seems like you're a very sophisticated upskilling program. And a lot of times there's industry leaders and you put them together and you say, what do you need for the workforce? And then you have to match what you have as available workforce to that. It looks like I wanted to see, like, where did you start with the workforce and the social work model, kind of what order that went in? Because it seems like they're usually leaned heavily one way or the other. It's a social work model that's trying to push up, or an industry-based model that's trying to pull up a little bit, but the balance of that seems to be key. So I kind of want to see if you had some general insight for that.
We did it all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we started seeking out our Dwyer scholars and forming a way to educate them through the partnerships with the other not-for-profits and the community colleges, but at the same time started definitely case managing them right away. And we do stuff like, we have a Dwyer Scholar app, and we give them badges at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. We have grants from like Walmart where we'll give gift cards, that kind of thing. So we're trying to keep them engaged, but it goes hand in hand. And what we do is, CNA training is a very short period of time, and that's our specific start. And then after a year, they then go to whatever other upskill they want to do. And we stay in touch for their lifetime. Once you're a Dwyer Scholar, you're always a Dwyer Scholar. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think just to follow up, do you have to do anything with the employee? I mean, your answer is like, we bought all the places that they're going to work. So I didn't know if that was in response to having difficulty, like you need to help have the work situation be something that fits with the workforce, and so you decided to own the institutions as opposed to trying to negotiate with a lot of different institutions that have a lot of different rules and cultures and things like that. So is that an intentional thing to make it more effective?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely intentional.
And
yeah.
has there been any failure in trying to do it just with what's in the marketplace, trying to get them placed individually? Is this based on any past experience?
No.
Okay.
No, it's been amazing. Mm-hmm. It seems to, our model's been, we've gotten a lot of national coverage, and our model's been called revolutionary, and I don't think it's something that people haven't thought of. I just think that people haven't put it all together in this holistic approach. And I do believe, when I'm looking for dirt in Texas and also in Maryland to build some multi-income housing, and I want to put childcare in the housing, and
Is childcare a need, really?
yeah. So I think that's going to really help even more.
I think this will be our last question.
Oh, okay. So I love this idea of outcomes-based evaluation or funding or whatever the thing is. What do you foresee, and maybe what have you already seen at TSTC as far as how that affects the people who are coming into the system? What changes do you foresee happening that people need to anticipate as they're coming into a system that's ultimately going to be outcomes-based?
I'm not sure I understood your question. You're talking about the student coming into the system and how we prepare for them?
Yeah.
So we have our own internal analytics team, and we're studying data to try to better understand what is it about a student that makes them successful. And I'll talk about our line worker program. One of the things that we found is they're all ex-athletes for the majority of them, right? So the majority of them are ex-athletes and are likely to be successful in this type of program. That is some of the tactics or traits that we look at as how we're going to market, who are we going to target. That's some of the data that we use to do it, but I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you are going to be paid basically based on who is successful when they leave their program, how does that shape the way you shop for the people who are going to come into your program at the front end?
That's exactly what we do. We're looking to see who's more likely to be successful, but we are an open enrollment institution. We will take any student that walks in through the door. And a key part of it is advising as well, right? Getting an understanding of what are their likes and dislikes, what are their hobbies, what are their habits, to help guide them in a program that will be successful and something that they can feel comfortable working in. We've had some folks that come in looking for computer programming and then end up in the line worker program. Because as you're talking to them, everything they're doing is outdoorsy and athletic, and it has a better fit. So it's just a matter of knowing who your student is and understanding their likes and dislikes and obviously their goals.
Thank you all for your great questions here, and thank you to everyone who joined us both in person and online. I think we are out of time now. Thank you as well to our panelists, Ms. Clapp, Dr. McKown, Ms. Henderson, and Vice Chancellor Herrera. And once again, just a reminder that the support of our members keeps events like this free and accessible for all. If you value our events, donate and join as a member at texastribune.org/donate. Thanks, everybody.